Zaxby's, indescribably good.
And good evening, Raider fans, and welcome to another edition of the Rocky Hidalgo Show, sponsored by Zaxby's. And as always, there are two Zaxby's locations in East Cobb off of Johnson Ferry, one at Lower Roswell and one at Shallowford. And, Coach, tonight, coming off the game last Friday, probably one of the more difficult performances you probably had as a coach, as the team just really didn't respond well. And my first question is, do you think that the fall break had anything to do with it from a preparation perspective, and is there anything that maybe you change next year as you deal with fall break?
I'm going to make the kids stay here overnight so they can't play Halo Reach all night long. That was the big talk when we came back, is how they, had kids talking about playing Halo Reach until 4 o'clock in the morning. And, I think it did to a degree. I think anytime you have a young team, distractions like that take you away from what you're focusing on, and I think that played a part in it. The other part is, I think Etowah, they've got a good football team. They came out and they played well and had a good game plan, and so it's a little bit on both sides. I don't think we did our part, and I think they were really ready to play. When
you have a game like that, what was the message that you gave to the boys after the game in terms of, okay, you have a young team? What do you learn from that? What do you take away from that kind of game?
Well, the biggest thing is every week is different on how you prepare for a team. There's a time to kick a team in the behind, and there's a time to wrap your arm around them and love them up. Friday night, they know they played poorly. I don't have to go back and tell them anything about hey guys, you stunk the joint up. They know they did. So we've got to get back out there and just go to work and be positive with them, and we really got to focus on practicing the way we practice. When we practice well, we'll play well.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the things that you took away from the game? Was there anything that stood out that Etowah did that you didn't expect them to do, or things that you saw during that game and said, hey, you know what, there's some things here that we can really build on?
Well, the biggest thing is defensively, I think we played very disciplined on defense. We made them execute the offense. We said going in the game, they've got a very big offensive line. Quarterback's good, backs are good. We had to make them execute the offense. By executing the offense, we felt they put the ball on the ground. We actually did that, and the kids hung in there and did the things we were supposed to. We could have tackled a little better early, but when you defend the option, sometimes that's the case. The thing that was disappointing with is some basic football plays kind of hurt us. The isolation play, the power play, and the counter play, which in the past we had done a good job of playing. The big thing I took away from is you never take those things for granted, especially with a young team. They need to work on those things every week, and you can't just focus on one thing. And right now we're so young, and we haven't played a lot of football, and we're becoming less young every day and more experienced every day. But it's still, we have to go back, and they're very literal kids. Our players are very literal players, and whatever you tell them, that's what they're going to follow, because they haven't had enough experience to kind of understand and deviate away from their coaching a little bit. Sometimes good players and good teams overcome their coaching and go beyond their coaching. And we're kind of right now, we're just working on being experienced. And I said at the beginning, we need to play games, and we still need to play games. And luckily, we've got 5 more games on the schedule, so we'll get there.
Yeah, and when you're halfway through the season, as a coach, isn't this, though, where you start to see the huge jumps forward by your boys, where that 5th to 6th game is a big leap, but boy, that maybe 6th to 8th game is a massive leap by your younger guys?
Yeah, and it is, and we've seen some of those guys step up. Our 2 middle linebackers last week, they both had double-digit tackles, and they really improved. I think our defensive interior play, Brad Noble, played really great last week, did what he was coached to do. Cody Allen showed a lot of discipline on the defensive line. We've gotten Zach Pope and Orton Whitaker back, which kind of makes us a little faster on defense. The Blaylock twins did a nice job tackling open field, but they got lined up where they're supposed to, and we get a little better every week. And defensively, I felt we played hard, and I actually think we played okay 90% of the time. We just kind of got to keep chugging along there and keep pushing them. The good news with the 5 games we have left is we're still in the mix for the playoffs. We're still in the mix really for the region championship. I told the kids the other day, if we win the next 5 games, we're going to have a share of the region title. We believe that. Our kids are resilient kids. They're winners. They're going to go back out this week. They're going to play great. I'm confident in that. I know our kids, the way we practiced this week, we've had a good attitude and we've had a lot of enthusiasm. So I think they'll be ready to rock and roll.
Well, Rocky, we're going to leave Etowah behind, and we're going to move now to talk about Lassiter. But the first thing we're going to do is hear from our sponsor, Zaxby's.
Zaxby's, indescribably good.
And welcome back to the Rocky Hidalgo Show as we now get ready to preview the Lassiter Trojans. Rocky, the last 2 years, Trojans have had somebody in that backfield that is no longer around, and that's probably a good thing with Mr. Mason now spending his time up in Athens. But Lassiter's still a very strong program. We're going to their place to play. It's a big rivalry for the boys. We interviewed a lot of the boys today with some of the senior spotlights. This is the game that gets them really charged up, isn't it?
It is. They enjoy playing these East Cobb neighbors and these guys that are close to them, and it's one of the big stars on the schedule. And everybody looks at we throw against them during the summer. Every time we do, it's kind of heated. It's the rivalry is apparent every time we get on the field with them.
Right.
Friday night is not going to be any difference. I think our kids will be ready to play. They'll be ready to get after it. They're going to play hard. I can promise you that.
You've got a different quarterback now at Lassiter, but does that really make a difference in terms of the scheme they're running this year and the type of offense that they're running against their opponents?
They do a lot of the similar things. They've got the tailback's a year older, the Jones kid. He's a really good player. Mm-hmm. They give the ball, probably run the ball a little more with him than they did in the past. The quarterback that they have right now is a really good player. He's very talented. Got a strong arm with him on him. He's he makes a lot of good throws.
Yeah.
What Hudson did there for 2 years was really impressive. He was as good a quarterback as I've ever coached against in 15 years of coaching. Mm-hmm. I think the Prince kid's going to be a really good player. I think he's a good player this year. But it's all about us. We're going to worry about us, and if we do what we're supposed to do, everything else will take care of itself.
When you've got a rivalry game, particularly with the younger team, there's a tendency for them to get really, really intense or really excited about that. How do you keep them kind of grounded as you want them to obviously have that intensity, but you don't want them to just get so far in themselves that they just lose focus?
Yeah, 2 years ago I felt like that's what happened to us. We went over there. We played hard, but we kind of played all over the place. And you don't want to do that. You want to play hard, but you want to play well as well. And that's what we talk about. We got to focus on us, what we're doing. Don't make the game about Lassiter. Make it about the Walton Raiders.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to do. And just stay focused on them. And really, really focus on our game plan and what we're trying to do. And we don't know what they're going to do on offense. They've had an off week, so we'll get some little dinks and dunks there that we have not seen. So as long as we know what we're doing, we'll feel like we're in good shape.
Well, good. Well, Rocky, last weekend we started talking about some picks that our fans had asked us, obviously the huge fan base that we have here. And I do believe you picked the Saints, but I think I did too.
Oh, well.
And as a Kickers father, we shouldn't even bring that up. But for this week, we thought we would talk about Oklahoma, Texas, Georgia Tech, Wake. We'll talk about your LSU Tigers. We'll talk about the Georgia Bulldogs, and we'll also pick up that Alabama, Florida, and Chase Thomas's game. But first one would be Oklahoma and Texas. The Longhorns got shocked a little bit last weekend in Austin.
Yeah, I know how Mac Brown felt after that game. I saw his press conference, and he was disappointed in himself and disappointed in his way his team played, and when you kind of get beat like that and you go out and beat in every phase of the game, you take it on yourself as the head coach. I know exactly how he felt. I think Texas will be ready to play this week. I'm going to go with the Oklahoma Sooners though, Schooner. So we'll see how that works out. But I'm going to go with Bob Stoops and the Sooners.
Sooners have struggled against some lesser competition, but when they played Florida State, they dominated them. Cincinnati and Air Force, I can see it might be hard to get your guys up, and we agreed on every pick last week. We got changes, but I just don't see after what I saw last week in Austin that the Longhorns are going to beat the Sooners. Georgia Tech did not play well on defense last week against NC State, and a lot of people are starting to say maybe NC State's better than we think, but they travel to Wake Forest. Wake Forest's defense has not been good. I would think that this would be a win for Paul Johnson and the Yellow Jackets.
Wake's struggled. I've watched them a couple times. They've struggled a little bit. Tech's not great on defense, but I do think they'll come out and run the ball and do the things that they want to do on offense and win the game.
Your LSU Tigers are at home against Tennessee. Mentioned to you as I was driving home from our game on Saturday night, listen to LSU on the radio, and their announcers are trying to be as positive as they can about an offensive scheme or a scheme that's struggling at quarterback to score points. But, Death Valley against the Volunteers, I wouldn't think they're going to have any trouble getting ready for that.
Yeah, LSU's quarterback can't throw up right now. That's as a diehard LSU fan, that's frustrating. But I do think defensively, they're one of the 2 or 3 best defenses in the country. I think they'll win that game.
Yeah, and Derek Dooley's got some work to do there, but you get the sense that the administration and even Coach Dooley himself, that sounds kind of weird to say, Coach Dooley, but everybody knows that there's a plan in place, and it's just going to take some time to execute that.
Yeah, I think they'll be patient up there. They've gone through the ringer up there over the last couple of years with things going on, and I think they've hired the right guy there because Coach Dooley is. I've been fortunate enough to kind of meet him here in the last year, and he's a good man, and he's what they need. They need somebody with sound fundamentals. Let me just say it that way to run that program, and I think he has sound fundamentals.
The Georgia Bulldogs are actually favored this week as they travel out to Colorado. So I don't know what that says about Colorado, but Coach, you've been around this program a long time, and it's a winning program, and Georgia has been a winning program. What is it like when you as a coach, and you all had a couple of 1-3 starts, 1-4 starts, back in like 2005, 2006. How do you kind of stay the course when you're dealing with that?
The biggest thing you have to do is you kind of go back to your basics. We talk about that as coaches after the game Saturday. You make a decision. We're going to go back out and we're going to coach. We're going to just coach. We're going to coach our kids and coach them as hard as we can. Sometimes you just don't have enough fodder for the gun, for the cannon.
Yeah.
And I think Coach Rick's probably dealing with that right now. His players aren't as good as the ones he had a few years ago. And on the college level is a little different because you can recruit those guys. So some of that still goes back to the head coaching staff for evaluating talent and all that stuff. But you just got to hang with what you do. You got to do with what you got to stay with what you know. Coach Rick and the staff there, they've been around winning football teams. They know what practice is supposed to look like. They know what the drills are supposed to look like. They're doing those things, and at the end of the day, if their players are good enough, they'll win some games. I do think they'll win out in Colorado this weekend, be a big win for them, and I hope they do because those guys on the staff are nice guys. I've met quite a few of them over the years, and they're good folks, and they're good coaches.
Yeah. Well, and they're under some pressure right now. I think the Dogs will respond as well. Tide's at home against the Gators. Gators offense came out with a little bit of a different look last weekend, and 6 touchdowns by a freshman quarterback who was kind of running in that open offense. Tide had that game that you knew they were going to have at least once during a championship kind of run. They're at home against the Gators.
They had an Alabama football game. They fell behind early, and they went back to the locker room and said, we're going to run the football and we're going to knock the fire out of the quarterback. And that's what they did. And eventually the bigger man won or the better man won. It was like two guys standing in and guys, one's jabbing and one's throwing haymakers. Guy throwing the haymaker won, and Alabama's going to do that. I'll pick Alabama this weekend. Florida's really good on defense.
Yep.
And we'll see what offensively they can do against Alabama. That's a different animal when you play the Tide right now. But I think Alabama's the best team in the country, and I'll stick with them at home.
Chase Thomas at Stanford and the Stanford Cardinal are having a terrific start this year, and you've got a visor, I understand, but they're going up to Oregon. Now, Oregon actually was my kind of pick of say, this could be a team that gets in the mix here, and they had a tough game against Arizona State Saturday. Stanford had a big game on national TV against Notre Dame. You like Stanford in this game, don't you? I'm
going with the Cardinal. Fear the tree. That's what the T-shirts are saying out there. I think Coach Harbaugh, what he's doing out there, I was reading some articles today about him on just kind of the attitude that they have, and I think Oregon's got a great football team. I really do, and I probably wouldn't be picking against them other than the fact that I just kind of think Stanford's got something going for them. And sometimes you just kind of get in a niche and your kids play hard. And they've got some injuries, but I think somehow, some way they win the game. We'll see how it works out.
Well, you got that player, that fullback, who scores a touchdown on offense, and then the next offensive play for the Irish, he runs back the interception. I'm going to pick the Ducks, the Quack Attack. I just think that if this game was in Palo Alto, I'd probably say, well, maybe Stanford, but I'm going to go with Oregon in this one. And then 2 pro games. We'll always pick your Saints. The Saints play this week against Carolina. Carolina comes into the Dome. I did hear the day that Drew Brees does have a little bit of an injury in his left knee, but of course he'll be out there. I would think that they bring the whole can of you-know-what against the Panthers this weekend.
Well, everybody's going to get everybody's best game because they're the Super Bowl champs.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I'm going to pick the Saints. I'll never pick against the Saints, even when they were going like 0-16 in 1979.
When they were the Aints.
Yeah, I was like 6 and crying into a pillow because the Saints lost every week. But I'm going to pick the Saints just cause.
Well, I think Carolina might be terrible too. And they've got a young quarterback with Jimmy Clausen who looked like a really young quarterback. And the Falcons host San Francisco, and San Francisco is another one of those teams that's in disarray. They fired their offensive coordinator this week. Falcons, that was a huge. Even though they won it because of the missed field goal, they came back, went down the field. You got to think that kind of win for a franchise like the Falcons, it's still relatively young, offensively and defensively. That's got to provide them with some strength going into this week.
Well, I think firing your offensive coordinator in the middle of the season, that's tough. The other side of it is I think Mike Smith's done a great job with the Falcons. He's a really good football coach, and I'll pick them to win this week.
Yeah, I would think that the 49ers are coming in at the right time for us, and the Falcons moved to 3-1, and game on between the Falcons and the Saints the rest of the season. Well, folks, hey, I wouldn't bet on any of it based on these two guys, but we have fun doing it, and we appreciate you being here. The Raiders travel to Lassiter for that big rivalry game as the Raiders try to move to 3-3 on the season, taking on the Lassiter Trojans at 7:30 at the Frank. Been another edition of the Rocky Hidalgo Coaches Show brought to you by Zaxby's. Thanks for tuning in.